everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Welcome to Hill Center. My name is Eli Campbell. I'm a programming coordinator here, and I'm really excited to see all these faces and Cubs hats in the audience. Can I ask, how many of you are here for the first time tonight? All right. Excellent. That's a great crowd. Well, we hope that you check out our website, hillcenterdc.org. Pick up some printed materials before you leave. We have lots of great stuff going on here all the time. I also want to thank the Capitol Hill Community Foundation for making free programming like this possible. They do wonderful things in this neighborhood and wonderful things for Hill Center, so we are very grateful that they're our friends. And then, without anything else, I'll welcome Bill Press and Mr. Scott Simon.
Thank you. We're on? Great. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming this evening for a very special Hill Center program. And as way of a plug, before we get started with Scott, I want to mention just a week from tonight, I hope you all come back for another great program, a book called Shattered, which is the account, inside Hillary Clinton's doomed campaign. It's the account of the campaign by Jonathan Allen and Amy Parnes. A wonderful book. A very special part of the book talks about how the Bernie Sanders campaign was launched in our living room, about 2 blocks from here on Capitol Hill, and launched over 2 dinners cooked by my wife Carol, who is here. So you have to come back to find out who is going to play Carol in the movie. I'll bring it back. So
Keira Knightley. We always hire British actors to play Americans.
So here with us tonight, the voice that we all know and recognize and love and look forward to, together with 4 million other friends, every Saturday morning on Weekend Edition Saturday. Scott has written 8 books, including 2 about the Cubs. The latest, a wonderful book, which is on sale tonight thanks to East City Books, My Cubs, A Love Story. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. I want to get to
Good
the
to see so much Cub gear around.
I want to get to the Cubs, but first, a couple of questions about things that might be happening for Cubs. I mean, we're so excited that you're here tonight because you probably, more than anybody else, can tell us the meaning of covfefe.
I actually talked about that on the air on Saturday. It's a very, well, I think Sean Spicer alluded to this when he said that a small number of people know what the present actually meant. And it's a signal to the Confeffian Federation. A series of planets several light years away. Now, I know this is a very sophisticated audience, so you will recognize a little-known fact of science that tweets actually travel at twice the speed of light. And I would see the Confeffians are tweeting at speed. And so this was actually a very shrewd and sagacious signal to the Confeffian Federation. I'm amazed that MSN, the mainstream media, just ignored that. I'm glad you asked, Bill. Thank you.
Are we having a problem with the mics?
Yeah, sorry. I'm getting it tweaked. I apologize.
Are we okay?
Yeah.
Do you need a sound check? Or?
I think we're okay, yeah.
Okay, all right, good. Well, speaking of tweets, Donald Trump is not the only one that's been tweeting in the last 24 hours about what happened in London and Donald Trump's reactions, particularly his comments about the mayor of London. You had something to say about that today.
You know, as my wife will tell you, I'm really
Who's
very
here?
serious.
Caroline?
My wife Caroline is here, and our youngest daughter Paulina, who is the wisest member of the audience, she's thoroughly asleep. Pardon me, what? Well, I mean, I'm fairly serious serious about trying to be an unbiased journalist. I mean, I have my personal convictions as a citizen, but I really think it's important, particularly in this day and age, to try and be unbiased and sometimes even contrary. All of which is a way of saying, the president's tweets were beyond pleasant. We have no closer relationship on this earth than the one we have with the United Kingdom. And that, if I might say, without getting emotional, is a relationship very much sown in the blood of London during World War II. And the way they stood against Hitler alone in the world when this country was still very much enraptured with the phrase we'll recognize in this time, which was America first. And I think Britons are always very good about pointing out that they wouldn't have prevailed in World War II.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think the microphone is off, or it's not.
I think it might be.
I can hear the man on the left, but not you.
Agreed.
That's right.
Something's happening.
Some people might be more eager not to.
Thank you for pointing that out, and
Yes.
I had to signal back here. But my microphone is
Yours is
working
just
fine.
fine.
Right, yeah.
This one.
Agreed.
Is this better?
Yeah.
I just pointing out that
Thank you.
this is our closest relationship. It should be beyond politics and beyond statecraft and beyond whoever is personal, beyond whoever occupies the White House. And, you know, on the contrary, I have been impressed by the pluck and the poise, and I think what the mayor of London said in a number of instances, but certainly in recent days, has been inspiring. And when he apparently said at a funeral today, he happens to be Muslim, to the perpetrators of this crime, you do not speak for me. I just think, forgive me, don't mess with London. I just think this is shameful, what I'm saying, and particularly at a moment the city not only I think could use the respect of the rest of the world, but has earned it. And as I think a number of people have pointed out, I'm afraid I just can't say. I don't see that it's what the President of the United States should be doing, even if he has that opinion privately, which I would not share. I don't see anything to be gained by enunciating it, particularly in these 140 character sort of sardonic riposts that he files in the middle of the night, and I just don't care for it. Let me put it that way.
Got it. I must say, I was listening Saturday in talking, in the interviews you did about the pulling out of the Paris Accords, first with Senator Dick Durbin,
Yeah.
and then with the gentleman from the Natural Resources Defense Council about China's role in renewable energy. Again, as a straight down the line, middle reporter, how do you read the president's action playing out in terms of the U.S. economy or the global economy?
Yeah, you know, I know almost nothing about that. Let me check with my wife. I know nothing about that. Why would I even say almost? And my wife will tell you I'm an enemy of the natural world. That's not overstating it, is it? No, and she always, you know, turn off the dam water. Do we want a drought? Why don't you turn off the light in your closet? I mean, I'm not. This is a way of saying that I'm not environmentally responsible in my personal conduct. How does that go? And I have covered a lot of stories in this country from people who, rightly or wrongly, and I think Senator Durbin pointed out, particularly where coal miners are concerned, and it's a rough thing. I mean, there are coal miners in southern Illinois, my home state, and a number of them feel very dispossessed by environmental concerns, particularly when they feel that they undertook to create clean coal.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely understand the sanctimony that they feel and don't like from the New York, Washington media complex that says, oh, those jobs are disappearing, you'll just have to learn to be an IT technician. Those jobs, by the way, are disappearing too, but in any event.
Replaced by robots.
Exactly, we all are. And in any event, I can understand why they don't like it, and they don't like to hear it, and where they feel a censorious lecturing tone, which is probably not helpful. That being said, as Senator Durbin said, jobs are disappearing in the coal mining industry anyway, because they're disappearing in every industry because of mechanization. It has nothing to do with environmental regulations. And it does strike me that not to understand that they're it's a White Sox cap, sir, isn't it? Yeah. No. My wife, do I wish the White Sox well, darling? Yes, thank you.
You're a brave man.
But not to understand that there's a future there is I think self-defeating. Now, it's also I don't like the feeling of the United States always being on the suddenly I should say looking as if they're opposed to science, opposed to progress, opposed to a modern view of the world. I'm not sure that that's going to be helpful in the next generation.
So I do a broadcast every morning from 7 to 9 a.m. And I constantly get the question from friends, so you only work 2 hours a day? Which leads me to the question I've been dying to ask, how do you get away with only working 1 hour a week?
It's actually 2.
Oh, it's actually 2. I'm sorry.
And I'm exhausted. Absolutely.
2 hours a week.
I can barely move after those 2 hours. It's a weekly show. We work all week on that show. I do other things. I write books. I do pieces for CBS Sunday Morning. A lot of you know, because I saw the glint of recognition in your eye, I'm in adult films. You remember the one I made with the donkey in the White Sox game? That's why you're wearing that. Yeah. God bless. Yeah. One of my favorites. I'm sorry, but I get off the It takes a week to do our show. I do a lot on it.
No, I'm facetiously asking that question, but
Yeah.
how do you, there's so much going on, particularly these days, the news cycle is happening so fast, it's hard to keep up with no matter how fast you run. So how do you sort out, how do you filter what you can talk about and what you don't in those 2 hours?
We've had on offer much more material than we can use, particularly since January 21st. It used to be that sometimes we could interview an expert of some standing on a Thursday, and trust that interview, generally speaking, would stand until Saturday morning. You can't do that anymore. Predict Friday nights. Isn't the analysis that the kids go to shul and the president starts tweeting? I don't know, but in any event, there's been more to sort through. And also, we want to be responsive to the times, and obviously there's an overwhelming interest in news, and particularly political news, and not just political news, but news events, and a decision like withdrawing from the Paris Accords that has real life consequences. And yet it's important to us not to be just a news show. It's important to us, we sometimes call ourselves a news variety show. It's important to us. We think that literature is part of the world. And we interview novelists, not just authors of nonfiction books, which is, certainly I'm here as one right now, although I've written novels too. But we think it's important to keep that up in what we care about in this country. It's important to do music interviews with artists. It's important to do stories that have only a dim relationship to the news, because that's all part of what makes us human. So we try and do that too. We're going to be doing our show this Saturday live on the stage of the Lyric Theater in Birmingham, Alabama. And we're trying to get our feet wet with something like that, because the political part of it is we want to go to a state that clearly voted for the candidate who was elected. in this last presidential
I
election.
think you're safe in Birmingham, Alabama.
Well, but Birmingham is different than, demographically and politically than the rest of Alabama. So but we are, we're making the effort that we should as reporters to reflect opinion in the state larger than the community of Birmingham. And we'll also obviously talk to Birmingham people too. But I mean, that's all. We don't want to get out of the bubble just to crawl into another part of the bubble. Yeah. And so we'll do that. But it's also important to us not to just do that for political reasons. We're talking to a couple of local musicians who will be on. We're talking to a couple of artists who will be on. We want to make that part of it too. And the thing is, it's unfortunate that particularly journalists in Washington, based in Washington, New York, and maybe the West Coast and Chicago, will go to a place like Birmingham if there's an anniversary on the Civil Rights Trail, or if there's a tornado. And we want to go at a time to maybe discover stories before they happen.
So, by the way, those of you who have not been to one of our programs before, Scott and I will engage in conversation for another 10 minutes or so, and then the second half hour is all yours. So think of your questions, and you'll get a chance in just a few moments. So, as a segue, can I get that for you?
No, too embarrassing.
As a sorry.
Thank you.
As a segue to the Cubs book.
I'm going to personally recycle this bottle. I'm not sure how.
As a segue to the Cubs book and back to Saturday, maybe you could share with us the story I enjoyed about Mr. Met. Oh.
Did people see this? We're talking about Mr. Met he's actually been the mascot of the Mets. He was the original Major League mascot. Major League teams, it used to be just a stuff for college football. He's the original Major League Baseball team mascot, and he's this big baseball head, enormous baseball head with the red stitches and then this perpetual smile. And I guess there's some differences of opinion as to what happened. There were some reports that some people were shouting some stuff at Mr. Met, which I'm sure happens all the time.
I mean, we're running around with a baseball
It's
head.
New York, But I'm sorry, you don't wear a big baseball head and not expect people to shout. But I mean, my God, it's Citi Field. But in any event, at some point as he was leaving the field, the Mets have not been having a good year. And they lost 7-1 to the Milwaukee Brewers. Leaving the field, Mr. Met flipped a middle finger. Now, I wondered on the air, Mr. Met has, for reasons I'm not sure why, 4 fingers. This is almost a Talmudic question. If you have only 4 fingers, what is the middle finger? I mean, this might mean something else altogether, right? It could mean, thank you for coming to Citi Field. It could mean, the D train is waiting for you. Have a good trip home. I mean, there are all kinds of things that it could mean other than the obvious. But the team apologized, yeah.
And Mr. Met is out of a job.
The guy inside the suit is out of job. Mr. Met, I guess he returned the next game. People were shouting things at him. Had a big apology on the board and all that. Do you remember the Cubs mascot, Clark? Yeah, Clark is like a bear, like a cubby bear, and they all have their perpetual smiles. And I was just kind of thinking about about Clark flipping the middle finger. It must have been jarring for children.
So, on the Cubs, I love the book, really. It is a wonderful, wonderful story. And a very, very much a love affair of you and the Cubs. But how could you be so much in love with a team whose owners supported Donald Trump?
Well, firstly, hey, can't we all just get along? Secondly, I mean, the Ricketts family is actually mixed bag politically. There's these 3 controlling owners, or 3 owners, Laura, Joe, and Tom Ricketts, who was the president controlling Laura Ricketts was a big Hillary Clinton supporter. She is a member of the Chicago Gay and Lesbian Hall of Fame. So she likes to say she's the only member of the Ricketts family who was in the Hall of Fame. One of the brothers was actually going to, I guess reports were that he was going to come here and work in the Commerce Department under President Trump, and for one reason or another that didn't work out. Tom Ricketts describes himself as in the middle of the road politically. I would peg him to be a Republican of the kind we don't see a lot anymore. Let's put it that way. And he's obviously free to be anything. As he says, I don't know why people are fascinated by this. He said, we're a typical American family. We kid each other about our differences, but we love each other and we work together, and isn't that what we should be? Now, during the presidential campaign, you might recall, I guess it was like in January or February of 2016, Joe Ricketts, the father, briefly funded the brief Anyone But Trump movement. And Donald Trump, then a candidate, sent a series of tweets. I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close. He said something like, the Ricketts family better watch out, otherwise I'm going to talk about everything they've done, what a terrible job they've done with the Cubs. You could have said that any of 107 years and been right, but not in 2016, when you can only talk about what a great job the Ricketts family have done. So I thought at first that when the Cubs visited the White House under President Obama in his last 4 days of office, I thought it had something to do with the tweet. And I asked Mr. Ricketts about that. He was still demonstrably upset. He said, you don't like it when Donald Trump takes after your mother. But the actual story, as I found out, was very sweet, nicer than that. Apparently, President Obama called up Joe Madden, the manager of the Cubs, and said, look, I am a White Sox fan. I am proudly a White Sox fan. He said, but Michelle is a Cubs fan. And he said, a lot of the people who have worked for me the longest are North Siders, and they are Cubs fans. And it would give me great personal pleasure to give them the gift of your visiting the White House in my last meeting, which I thought was just so wonderful and so thoughtful. So that's why they did.
Yeah, it's a great moment there in East Room. So I love Chicago. I don't go there that often, but friends of mine did take me one time below ground there to the Billy Goat Tavern. Is there really, or was there really, a Billy Goat curse?
Oh, Billy Goat curse. Well, I obviously talk about that in the book.
Yes.
Certainly not, right? We don't believe in curses. It began in 1945 when Billy Goat Sionis, who owned Billy Goat Tavern, brought his pet Billy Goat, who had fallen off a truck apparently on his way to the stockyards a number of years before, brought him to Wrigley Field for the 1945 World Series against the Detroit Tigers. And it was a rainy day, and he took the goat around on the field. Now, Billy Goat was very well known to the ushers and the members of the Cubs used to come into his bar and drink for free. There was never a bill for, somebody who was on the Cubs, or for that matter, people on the grounds crew or the cops who worked the field. And so he brought Billy Goat around, and he said hello to the kids. And everyone thought that was wonderful. And it was raining a bit, so Billy Goat brought the goat to where he was sitting. And apparently there were some, according to reports in the paper, there were some complaints about fans who were sitting nearby about the way the goat smelled. Now, I believe I say in the book, having been to Wrigley Field a lot, I don't know if Cub fans want to get into that controversy. Who smells worse, the goat or the Cubs fans? But in any event, so the Andy Crane ushers told Billy Goat that he and his, the goat had to leave, and now, supposedly he said, as long as I live, the Cubs never going to be in another World Series, and sent a telegram to follow up on that. And Mr. Wrigley, P.K. Wrigley, owned the team at that point, sent him a telegram, wrote him a letter, tried to repair the damage right then. I mean, of course there wasn't a curse. By the way, the man I got to call Uncle Charlie, Charlie Grimm, my Uncle Charlie, was the manager of the Cubs in 1945. He was married to my Auntie Mary. And in any event, certainly there's not really a curse. As I say in the book, I think the real curse was the Cubs were in the World Series in 1945, and you know, with the team that was, and Uncle Charlie loved them, but this was during the middle, or this was, most able-bodied men were in uniform at that point. So this was a team that was made up of a lot of people who had been too old, or in one case, a one-armed shortstop. I mean, or a left fielder, I should say, began as a shortstop. They moved to middle. In any event, it was wonderful if they won the World Series, but people don't really count this in many ways. But all the others. So they began to tail off when the big guys got back after World War II. In 1947, the Brooklyn Dodgers signed Jackie Robinson, or they signed him in 1945, and he came to the club in 1947. And within 3 or 4 months, Major League Baseball integrated. The St. Louis Browns integrated, the Cleveland Indians integrated. The Chicago Cubs did not bring African-American ball players to their club until they signed Gene Baker and Ernie Banks and brought them up in 1955. 1955. The Yankees were even later, and the Red Sox, of course, were the latest. Not until they brought up Pumpsie Green, or as he's known in Boston, the immortal Pumpsie Green. So I suggest certainly there was no curse of the Billy Goat. I think the Cubs did not play as well as they should. They should have been, I mean, every team, baseball never should have been segregated, but the Cubs should have been among the first franchise to bring in African-American ball players. They shouldn't have waited until 1955, and I have no problem suggesting that's one of the many reasons I think they didn't play very well, because they weren't signing all the best players that were available.
I must say, I cannot think of anything more frightening than to be asked, which I never will be, asked to throw out the first pitch at a game. What? How did you prepare for that? I mean, weren't you scared to death?
Oh, darling, my wife is nodding yes. I took it all in stride, didn't I? Oh, hardly. I'm doing it again this Sunday.
Whoa, this Sunday?
This Sunday. I'm flying from Birmingham to Chicago, and I'm throwing out the first pitch.
I think you should go to Chicago and practice on that.
Well, first time I did it, I practiced with my buddy Louis Carp, my old battery mate Louis Carp in Lincoln Park in Chicago, and I was smugly and naively exultant. Remember when we met up that day, you were at the American Girl shop in Michigan Avenue with our daughters? And I said, oh, darling, I can do it. Because Louis and I had measured off 60 feet and I'd thrown it. And then I got out on the mound the next night, and it looked like the plate was in Paris. I couldn't believe how much further it went. And I was preceded on the mound by a Girl Scout who was Sandy Koufax, right? Absolutely amazing. So thoroughly intimidated. So the second time went a little better, but I was in training for 9 months with my yoga instructor. Because Stephanie Sheridan, I believe her website is Yoga is Life, if I'm not mistaken, and Stephanie, who's in New York now, Stephanie figured out, she took it very seriously, God bless her, and she figured out that and I think people will tell you this is quite true, the strength does not come from your arm, it comes from the delivery of your legs and your carriage, where she figured out the psoas, which, forgive me, is kind of like the tenderloin muscle. And we worked a lot on my psoas. And she has a maneuver that I still do called the swastikansa. It's unfortunate. Remember, the swastika was a Hindu symbol centuries before it was adopted by someone else. And she told me the name of it was the swastikansa, and I did it Stephanie. We have got to find a new name. I'm not going to do the swastika. I'm sorry. In any event, I really worked at it, and I got the pitch over. I got the pitch over. So in any event, all right. But again, it's thoroughly intimidating.
Don't be nervous, but we'll all be watching on Sunday.
Thank you.
So we have to talk about Game 7 of the World Series last year.
I'm so glad you asked.
I had an email from our mutual friend John Andrews out in Santa Fe, who wanted you to admit that the Cubs only won because they got help from above when the rains came and gave the Cubs a chance to regroup and then come back and win. That was one of the greatest games ever.
Oh, it was one of the greatest games ever. I went to all 3 games up in Chicago, and they lost 2 of them. And in fact, I was walking down Clark Street on my way to Wrigley Field to the third game, and I stopped and I called my wife and I said, "Darling, is this ridiculous? The Cubs have lost every World Series game that I went to. Why don't I just, sell my ticket to one of these deeply unscrupulous men here that are scooping up thousands of dollars for them? We'll be, a little closer to tuition, and the Cubs will have a chance of winning." And my wife underscored to me that if I didn't go to the game and the Cubs lost, I would blame myself for not being there. And even worse, in a sense, if I didn't go and they won, I could never again watch a Cubs game. So they went, and I went, and they won that round. I got some feelers to go to Cleveland, but I ostensibly had this other job that I had to do. So in any event, it was one of the greatest games of all time. And because, the Cubs were behind for a great, actually the major part of it, looking back on it. And then there was this magical 17-minute rain delay, which, as we know now, some of the story, Cubs had the best record in Major League Baseball during the regular season. And Jason Hayward, their left fielder, called them around in the locker room and said, "Look, we have been the best team in baseball all year. We have come this far. We can't quit. We can't let, I'm getting misty just thinking about the speech now." And they came back, and as we now know they won. But that last play, the very last play, could have so easily gone the other way. Cleveland was threatening. They had a man on base. There was a ground ball to Chris Bryant. Chris Bryant, the most valuable player, at third base. Chris Bryant, who's like a gazelle in the field. Field was wet. Scooped it up, but his right leg slipped out from behind him. As he threw the ball, he pegged it over to Anthony Rizzo at first. The ball was a little high. Rizzo had to go up, had to jump up, had to get above his toes. Had the ball sailed 3/4 of an inch higher, would have gone over Rizzo's head, might have bounded into the dugout. Cleveland might have won the World Series right then and there. Oh, God. But he gloved it, came down on the bag, and the Cubs won in the last second. But it reminds us in a great game how close victory and defeat. And certainly they're within 3/4 of an inch.
Have you ever thought about doing play-by-play? What do you
No,
think?
It calls for a very specific set of skills. I don't have them. Has anyone here seen Brockmire?
Yeah.
On the Independent Film Channel, Hank Azaria, we were able to interview him a few weeks ago. He's terrific as the announcer, as Brockmire. And as Amanda Peet, as the team owner, says to him at one point, "This is a disgraced now minor league announcer." I can't, in front of my daughter, tell you how he happened to disgrace himself, actually, when he was the Kansas City Royals announcer. But in any event, he's talking about the game. She says to him, "Boy, you could sure paint a picture." But to do that on the fly, I can't.
So, one other thing I learned from the book, just a couple more questions, and these all yours, is that there's a serious problem, apparently, at Wrigley Field that they have to really be careful about and have guards posted, because people like to, let's say, leave a remembrance of their loved ones on the field.
Yeah, it is widely thought to leave the league in cremated remains, which the club does not permit for all the obvious reasons. That the players would be awash in cremated remains; they'd be ankle deep in. And also, as the club explained a number of years ago,
People have done it, right?
Oh, people have done it. Uncle Charlie is I know of two people who got Uncle Charlie Grimm's ashes I was there for that. Because my Auntie Marion always maintained that Mr. Wrigley had promised Charlie Grimm that his ashes would be strewn around first base. And at that point, the Tribune owned the team, and they were, "Oh, Marion, don't do this." And she said, "No, no, no, no." And I don't know, she threatened to go public or something like that. And so I got a call the night before. We went out at like 10:30, 11 in the morning to Wrigley Field, and this was while the Cubs were away. It was in March during spring training, and Annie Marion got to, sprinkle Uncle Charlie's ashes along first base. Annie Marion had been a lounge singer, so she sang, "I'll be seen all the old familiar places. It was beautiful. And she came back to where we were standing along the first base line, in the seats, and she said, "Well, how about that, sports fans?" Because it's Wrigley Field, there were a number of bars that, with 6 a.m. licenses that were open that we could go to. In any event, the North Side funeral homes are always getting requests. Can you help me bottle up something so I can sprinkle it? No, we can't do that. The club knows that it's done. If you don't tell them, there's not much that they can do about it. Steve Goodman, who became famous a second time this last season, where he wrote the song "Go Cubs Go." A lot of people will still, City of New Orleans was obviously his biggest hit, but a lot of people will remember him for a dying Cubs fan's last lament, which was really a big hit. Friends of Steve, Steve and I went to the same religious assembly. Friends of Steve went to the groundskeeper and gave him the Chicago greeting, which was a $20 bill wrapped inside a Playboy magazine. And got to go in there and spread Steve's actions, which were appropriate. But I have my own thoughts when my time comes. I do think it's important, by the way, I don't mean to be grisly, but I think it's important. Our organs can do things for people after we're gone, so I want to, so look, I hope that's done, but whatever else is remaining of me, I'm going to leave the seat numbers to my daughters, and they'll know what to do.
And you wrap up your book with that the Cubs is more than just sports, it's all about life as well. You say, "Loving the Cubs has taught a lot of us, not just Cubs fans, that life is more about trying than winning, and trying again, and then again."
Yeah.
Sums it up, huh?
Yeah, and I understand the publicity for the book, and I Penguin Random House has done a wonderful job positioning it and all that sort of thing. And I understand why they use the phrase, long-suffering Cubs fans. And there was a moment following the famous what's called the Stephen Bartman incident, when my wife found me sobbing behind the bathroom door early one morning, trying to hide that from her about what had happened. So I can't tell you that the Cubs haven't made me cry over the years. But suffering? No. It's been an awful lot of fun. And I do think that I say this as the father too, I think it does teach you, there is no such thing as a permanent defeat. There's really no such thing as a loser. Every loser can have his or her day. It just took 108 years for the Cubs. But I think it also teaches you not just to enjoy the results, but to enjoy the journey. And there's no better place to see a ball game than Wrigley Field. I think very few better places to spend an afternoon. Engage in anything than watching a ball game.
And I can't think of a better way to spend an evening on this guy's side. I have a feeling there might be a question or two in the audience. We need the microphone so we can capture your questions for the camera. Sure.
As a Cleveland Indians fan, I know about long suffering, but it's still a lot of fun. Two quick questions, I hope they're quick. One is, what do you think of the changes that have been made to Wrigley Field in the last, say, 10 years? And two, have you ever seen a film called Catching Hell, which is mostly about Steve Bartman, but it's also about scapegoats in sports?
This is the ESPN.
Yeah, Alex Gibney directed.
It was very good, yes. That was a fine film. I really like. Stephen Bartman is the man who may or may not have interrupted with Voices of Lose attempt to catch a ball over by the third base line, just where the seats were. I did see that. It's a fine film, and I learned a lot from it. What was it? Oh, the changes to Wrigley Field. I think 8 to 10 years ago, I immediately had the purest reaction, oh no, they're changing our field. But I've changed for a few reasons. One is they won the damn World Series. But the other thing is, I think a lot of us Cubs fans were a little too enamored of keeping it as like a timepiece, a museum diorama, and not a living, functioning ballpark, which I think is wrong. I mean, if you want to do that, you're going to be a minor league team, and I think there might be room for that. But it's Chicago; they shouldn't, it shouldn't be a museum. Mark Grace, they're a great first baseman of many years standing, used to say, sometimes I think this isn't a ball club; it's a damn theme park. And there's something to that for years with the hand-operated scoreboard, that sort of thing. I think the Ricketts family has made intelligent changes that certainly keep the essential character of the ballpark and don't destroy it. Look, the one thing that the ballpark has, which can't be destroyed by the conventional forces of the ball club, is that it's in a neighborhood. I mean, something was on my mind on our way here. All these wonderful new ballparks that are being built. The one here, I think, at Nat Stadium, the one in Texas, which is now about 20 years old, the one in Pittsburgh, the one in San Francisco, where we've been to a few games. They're great ballparks that in many ways are trying to imitate Wrigley Field by using red brick and even the sprig of ivy. The one way in which they cannot imitate Wrigley Field is Wrigley Field's in the middle of a neighborhood. And those places have all been created before the neighborhood. They want the neighborhood to surround it, or it's against the ocean, as it is in the case of the ballpark in San Francisco. And that's, I think, the essential character of the Cubs and the relationship between the Cubs and the White Sox.
Is there a little corner of warmth in your heart at all for the Nats?
Yeah. I don't dislike the Nats. I wish them. I'd say they're about 5th or 6th on my list of teams that I would root for. Look, it's fine, and I think it's
They're first in the league.
Pardon me?
They're first in their division.
Really, I hadn't noticed that. That's interesting. Really? Well, as we Cubs fans can tell you, this early in the year, it hardly matters. Let's hope a relief pitcher doesn't choke Bryce Harper again. I'm sorry. I have taken. We've been to school functions at Nat Stadium. Taken my daughters home. It's a lot of fun. I like the food is great.
So those of us who've been Cub fans for a long time, 1961 was my introduction. You count on one hand the successful seasons that even came close to 2016, right? 1969, 1984, 1989, 2003, and 2016. So my question is, you have to before something, right, all those intervening years, who was some of your favorite players not on one of those winning teams?
One of my favorite players who wasn't on one of those winning teams. The '69 team won nothing.
Well, they were true.
Yeah, no, it is arguably, until last year, I would say it's the greatest Chicago Cub team of all time. They won buckets. I'm very much of the, I grew up loving Ernie Banks, Ferguson Jenkins, the great pitcher, Jose Cardinal, who I understand was Michelle Obama's favorite player when she and her father were watching the game after school. I had a particular, I really like Randy Hundley, the catcher. Fergie, I imitated Fergie. I tried to pitch like Fergie Jenkins. I tried to, be like Fergie Jenkins, even when he smoked marijuana. That small little arrest thing. And I always admired, and I still like this, Fergie Jenkins for, he also tried to really be a good hitter too. I mean, he tried to play the whole game. And, that's one of the things I love about Kerry Wood. Wasn't the Cub team that won anything. He was a great hitting pitcher. I mean, pardon me?
He hit a home run in the last game of.
Thank you, in Game 7 of two. Right, because the one that they lost to really lose in 2003. Yes, he did. Yeah.
Baseball fans, they know that. Yes, Eli, tell us about books, just to be sure everybody understands. Are they
Yes, yeah. If you guys head to the right when you walk out the doors, East City Bookshop is selling copies of Scott Simon's book, and then I believe that he's willing to sign copies as well. Is that
Are
correct?
you kidding? Of course.
Yeah, so do that. So that'll be in the gallery to the right.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I'll come to you next. Please.
This last time I was watching that seventh game of the World Series intently, without even knowing that Jason Hayward trying to save his game because he wasn't playing that well. You could tell that the Cubs were going to win because the Cleveland pitcher couldn't go back out again after that rain delay. So that's what it was. And I thought the headline should have been "Rain Delay Ends 108-year-old Drought." But no one asked me. But we have the spreading of the ashes. In Washington, D.C., we had a death in the last 9 days of a myth. A great man who was written up in the Sunday Post, Baseball Bill, died. And the ashes will be coming in about 4 to 6 weeks. And I think he should be, some of it should be at RFK before it's thrown down, because that's where he worked. And he should be at maybe Nats Park. So any sort of help on your part.
I really don't have anything to do with that. It sounds like a great idea.
How about up front here? Yes. Just wait for the microphone, please. You got your reputation now, Johan.
Yeah, no, I
People
know.
calling on
You're
you.
going to be hearing from strangers all over the country.
If I may switch back
Yes.
to politics in your show,
I'm sorry.
to politics in your show, if you had a chance to interview the president, what question would you ask him?
If I had a chance to interview President Trump? What are you doing up so late? I mean, I might begin there. I don't, what Ariana Huffington says. And she's become kind of an expert in
7 hours?
sleep deprivation.
Oh.
Doesn't get enough sleep. That explains a lot. I wouldn't want to answer that in any serious way. There'd be a lot to talk about. I don't expect that to happen anytime soon.
Just, okay. I don't ignore this side, so I keep looking, but hands, a lot of hands over here. Let's, yes.
Hi, just want to go back to a subject you touched on earlier. Who is your favorite voice of the Chicago Cubs, TV or radio, during your life?
Oh, well, my godfather, Uncle Jack was. Thanks. No. My poor wife, how many times over the years have you heard this story? But in any event, so Uncle Jack, for those of you, because I never get a chance to do this on NPR, but Uncle Jack's home run call, if I may. What's it? But, hey! Oh, well, on Rainbow Avenue! Years ago, I was told by a woman in New York that she could tell that a man was of a certain vintage and from the north side of Chicago if during their moment of highest romantic fruition they shouted, "Hey, hey." And I told this to Uncle Jack, and he thought it was the greatest gratification of his life. But the day he used to get, "You keep saying hey," no, okay. So of course Uncle Jack was mine. And I feel bad. I mean, I think I can tell this story here. Harry Carey succeeded Uncle Jack, and Harry Carey became very, very famous, and deservedly so. And the two of them, they were friends, but there was a certain rivalry, to say the least. And Uncle Jack had the stroke that began his last illness while he was getting dressed for Harry's funeral. And my mother called me that, that day, and I called Uncle Jack in the, I reached him that night at Northwestern Hospital in his room, and he said, well, Slugger, I guess I was just getting, I guess I was a little too excited getting dressed for Harry's funeral. I'm sure they're best of friends now.
I've got a two-part question. One, in your discussion prior to Q&A, almost every time you refer to your wife or your family, I was wondering if you'd like to introduce them. We can't see them on this side.
Yes, my wife, Caroline,
I would get up, but Polly doesn't sleep on my lap.
and our youngest daughter, Paulina, is 10. We have an older daughter, Elise, who is not with us tonight because she's on a service trip in Camden, New Jersey. And so we're very proud that she's doing it.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Second question about your book. How do you structure it? How did you go about writing a book? What's in it?
Well, I think for $23, you can find out for yourself. I wouldn't begin to. I begin by describing a dream that I still have about pitching for the Cubs when they win the World Series, and then I continue on through their history with last year's team, with some personal family stuff.
But it's a wonderful story, even for someone who's not a big sports fan. It's a great story and a lot of important life lessons, and wonderfully written too, from the heart as well. But can I ask, so did Babe Ruth really point
Well,
to center field? Really did?
I will.
They talk about that in the book.
I do, and Justice Stevens, John Paul Stevens, was there that day. I think he was Paulina's age, if I'm not mistaken. He was there for that World Series game, and I don't want to dispute John Paul Stevens. He says that Babe Ruth pointed. Now Charlie Root, who was the Cubs pitcher, said that he didn't point. And he said if Babe Ruth had pointed to center field, I would have considered that a taunt, and forgive me, I would have put him on his ass. So, Charlie Root versus John Paul Stevens, I don't know. Babe Ruth always maintained he pointed, but the Babe was a great showman. So, for sure, the Cubs were taunting Babe Ruth in a way that I think umpires don't permit these days. And that was just a very silly thing to do. He was the best home run hitter in baseball, and you should have just said, "What an honor to have seen you, Mr. Ruth. Have a good time up in that, Mr. Ruth," instead of taunting him and working into a
I
friendship.
recall seeing the video.
There was a film.
There is a film.
There's film of it, certainly, yeah. And there were other. But of course, that's in the general direction of the pitcher, and so, or was he just he sort of got his hand on his hip and the bat that's tucked in there, and he's kind of going like that. Who knows? Yes. I mean, did he say, "I'm going to hit that next ball over there"? That Justice Stevens maintained. That's what he maintains. That's what he said.
That's what it is.
But I think Supreme Court justices will tell you that eyewitness testimony is often faulty.
Hi, my whole family, we're a big fan of yours, and I want to thank both of you for this opportunity. A little off topic, but I was wondering, one of your colleagues, Frank Support, just passed, and if you had any stories with him or with the Cubs to bring back into context.
Frank was wonderful. We had, before we had children, my wife and I had the pleasure of traveling with Frank, and I don't know how many cities we had. Frank and Neil Conan. Neil had a book out about having been a minor league baseball announcer. I had a book out on, it was a Jackie Robinson. And Frank's book was one of his novels. What do we call it? The Home Run Tour, if I'm not mistaken. And it was just wonderful to be with Frank and hear his stories. And I for those who, I do an essay every week, because I did on that news last week. And as I said on that tour, Frank's essays that he did every every week in the morning edition, were very much a kind of inspiration and model for me when it came to writing a weekly essay. Because I learned from him, he was a wonderful writer. I learned from him, you can't always be serious or people will think you're a fool. You can't always be allegedly funny or people will think you're a clown. You have to mix it up. You have to do a little of both, and ideally sometimes a little bit funny, a little bit serious within the same 2 minutes and 15 seconds if possible. And I do remember everywhere we went in the country, and it ranged from, we were somewhere in Arizona, I mean, small town in Arizona, right, Flagstaff, and then North Carolina, Greensboro, I forget where, in addition to New York and Chicago and Nashville, as I recall. Everywhere we went, Frank would figure out some bizarre family relationship that enabled him to say, "So I feel like I'm at home." It was absolutely extraordinary, the relatives he kept discovering in far-off places all around the country. He was wonderful. And then I wrote about his family a bit. We did a book on the blessing of adoption a few years ago. And Frank, as many people know, his daughter, first daughter in his family, died of cystic fibrosis when she was 4, if I'm not mistaken. And he wrote a heart-piercing book about that. And Frank and his wife were told that they shouldn't have children in what in our family we call the traditional manner thereafter because of health complications. And so he and Carol wound up adopting a little girl from the Philippines in Charlotte. So we talked to them about what we consider the blessing of adoption. He was not only a wonderful writer, wonderful sports writer, he was I think for some of us, he was in some ways a model as a father. And as I think of it, one of the reasons why I think we dragged our poor daughter here tonight is that he was never, sports writer, how sports writers like to pretend to be. And he was not one of the sports writers who would spend late nights in the bar with the guys. He was home with his family. He traveled a lot and tried to bring his family to a lot of different places, as my wife and I tried to do with our children. So he was not only a kind of professional model, he was a model as a father.
So we here at the Hill Center feel part of the NPR family, I must say. We've had the pleasure of talking with Robert Siegel and Mara Liasson, and tonight what a treat. Scott Simon, thank you for who you are, and thank you for what you're doing. Thank you.